Good morning, everyone in Business Law 2. I thought I'd put up a brief, summary of what I think are the critical aspects of Chapter 23, Negotiation and Discharge. The videos I'm going to put up from YouTube or articles that I might put up, whether it's for this chapter or for other chapters, are often much better executed than I could ever do. But because this is a remote class, I think students sometimes like to hear me, in the flesh, so to speak, giving a little discussion about the high points of each chapter. And so I'm trying to keep up with that new culture, if you will, of having some form of presence, if you will, with the classroom. So anyways, chapter 23, it's a fairly short chapter, but it's important. And this is the process of negotiation and discharge. We know there's really two forms of drafts or checks that we're going to worry about in terms of whether it's bearer paper or order paper. Bearer paper is negotiated, we know, just by passing it along. And so if I had a check made out to cash and the person that drew it signed the front, don't call that an endorsement, just call it a signature on the front. Now they give it to me. In order for me to negotiate it, all I have to do is present it to either a new party or to the drawee, which is the bank. What's interesting about that is most of the time the bank will actually require me to sign it. And anybody that's going to become the new holder should demand that I sign it. They don't have to. It's totally negotiable just on passage. But why this is what this chapter is revealing is when somebody endorses on the back, they add themselves to potential liability if the negotiable instrument isn't honored by the primarily liable party, the bank usually. If it's a note, it would be the maker of the note. Sometimes, for whatever reason, it's not honored. And what are you going to do as the holder? Well, you're going to look for secondarily liable people. And who are those secondary liable people? It may be the maker on a note, they're primary liable, but on a draft, it might be the drawer, but it might be also all of those that have negotiated the instrument through endorsement. Unless either they negotiate it through simply handing over bearer paper, then there's no liability for that individual, except certain warranties. We'll get to that in a minute. And then those who are endorsing, if you're going to be an endorser and you're going to negotiate, you may want to potentially limit your liability or do a restrictive endorsement to give you certain protections. So let's go through it a little bit. Yeah, that's what it is. Because endorsing or transferring a negotiable instrument, there are certain liabilities that pass automatically. The place for endorsement, we know that it's the 1.5 inches on the back of the check. It would be on the left-hand side as you have the check facing. If you turn it over, it'd be over on the left. And that's where you're supposed to sign. Pretty straightforward. And we know, and the book does, I think, a very nice job of saying, well, what if, like, my name is James M. Corman. What if somebody wrote a check to me and they wrote on it James K. Corman? I can endorse it as it was done incorrectly. I can endorse it in my correct name, or I can endorse it in both names. And the law is really trying to basically make sure intent is established. So if it was the intent of the party to draw the check to me, we don't care about typos so much. And it's called a corrective endorsement. I think the book is pretty straightforward in explaining that. Multiple pays, this is interesting. I don't know how often this happens. Well, it happens a lot, but it doesn't happen too much in the alternative, meaning to James Corman or to my, some of you actually might have him on a class, Lee Howard, who teaches at the Mount. He's a lawyer. So what if the check said to James Corman or to Lee Howard? That means in order to negotiate that instrument, either I have to endorse on the back or Lee Howard, but not both. Both could, both don't have to. Those checks are fairly rare. That's called the alternative or the or option, and that's basic English language. What's more likely is to have a multiple pay with the word and, which is conjunctive. It means you have to have both and. So if it's to James Corman and Lee Howard and I sign the back, that's not enough to actually negotiate the instrument. We need Lee Howard's endorsement as well. And therefore, the accepting member might be liable to the non-endorsing party because they didn't endorse. I think it's fairly straightforward in the book on that stuff. Blank endorsements. Now that's interesting. So say somebody wrote a check out to me, paid to James Corman or to his order. Usually says the order of James Corman. And now on the back, I just sign it in blank. What does that turn that document into now? No longer is it order paper. If I just sign it like that, it now becomes bearer paper. And now anybody down the road can negotiate simply by passing the note along or the draft along. That's called a blank endorsement. Now, why do we care about that? Well, now the person's going to present it to, say, my bank is at Bank of America. They go to present it to Bank of America for payment. They may refuse it for whatever reason. And now you're going to be thinking like, well, now I got a bad check. Who can I go after? Well, you can go after the person that initially was the drawer, the person that signed on the front. But later, we're going to learn in the later chapters, you can go after these endorsers as secondary liability because it's a blank endorsement. And there's going to be certain warranties and promises, which I'll get to in the other chapter. A special endorsement, that's when I want to reduce it. I just don't want to turn it into basically the equivalent or close to the equivalent of cash by just signing the back. I might want to give it to, say, my son. So I might sign pay to the order of Anthony Corman, James Corman. That is a special endorsement. It's reduced it down now to only Anthony Corman can endorse it, turn it back into bearer paper, or he also can do a type of special endorsement. Qualified endorsements, those are the ones where you're saying, hey, I don't want liability on this potentially. So you say without recourse, meaning if something's bad with the note or the draft later on, you don't want them to go back against you. That's not total escaping of liability, but it is on certain promises in terms of primary liability on the face of the instrument. However, automatic warranties will still go with it. So to protect yourself, the kind of qualified endorsement you want to give is without recourse and without warranties. That pretty much says you're only giving whatever document it's good for, and someone can't go after you. The problem with that kind of endorsement, and this is what the book doesn't get into, is that if you're the person receiving it, what are you going to think of a document and say, yeah, I'll endorse it right now, and I endorse it without recourse and without any warranties on the instrument? I would think, should be concerned about the collectability on the note later on. And so it's sometimes hard to negotiate an instrument with this third party with those kinds of limitations on doing restrictive endorsements. So a qualified endorsement still warrants, and this everybody still warrants this, to the initial transferee, that the instrument's genuine, that the endorser has good title to the instrument, and that the instrument has not been altered. There's no known defenses in there that are good against the endorser, and the endorser has no knowledge of any insolvency proceedings, bankruptcy proceedings, and the like against the drawer. An endorser may avoid all of these warranties as well by endorsing an instrument without recourse or warranties, and that's the way to do it if you're trying to avoid liability. Good luck. Restrictive endorsements, you can say things like for deposit only or for collection only, and then the party making demand upon it, usually a bank, is going to have to honor those restrictive endorsements on the back. Now, why do we care? We know endorsers have certain liabilities. One is liability for payment on the instrument itself. By making an endorsement, the endorser, with the exception of qualified endorsement, agrees to pay any subsequent holders the face amount of the instrument if the holder presents the instrument to the primary party when due and the primary party refuses to pay. That's huge. Think about it. If you endorse the back of the check, they go and try to submit it to Bank of America and they don't honor it, they can go after not the person that signed on the front initially. They can go after whom? They can go after you as the endorser on the back of the instrument, the original payee. That's a big deal. Now, in order, the holder, after they went and tried to present it to the drawee for payment and got denied, they have to give the endorser notice, and it's basically must be given before midnight on the third full business day. I just think it is 3 full business day of the default. Gives them ability to cure with the drawee, but they have to be given that notice under the UCC before they can bring collection actions against the endorser. All unless you waive the warranties under the special endorsement, there are certain warranties also that come with endorsement. And they differ for liability on the face of the paper in that they are not subject to the requirement of presentment and notice. You don't have to do that first. The distinction is also important for the purpose of limiting liability. An endorsement without recourse destroys only the liability of the endorser for the face of the instrument. It does not affect the warranties. And what are the warranties of a qualified endorser? Those are listed basically on the previous page, unfortunately, but that the document is existing, that they're the valid holder of it, that they have the power to transfer the document, and that there's no known solvency proceedings going against them at that given time. And those kinds of warranties can be sued upon. So obligation of the negotiator. So if you're going to negotiate bearer paper, all they have to do is pass it, but what are they going to make you do? They're going to be smart. They're going to say you have to endorse the back. And they say, why? It's negotiable paper. I don't have to do it. It's made up to cash. You sign it later on. Banks are not going to accept it without your endorsement, nor is any other third party I don't think, going to accept it with endorsement because they want to be able to go after you if for some reason there's a failure to honor that instrument. So liability to the immediate transferee of a warrantor of the genuineness of the instrument. Here they are right now. Here's the warranties. Genuineness of the instrument, title to it, the capacity of prior parties, and its validities. Those pass automatically to the next person if it's just going to be negotiated over by handing the instrument that is a bearer instrument. You want all of the warranties. You want all of them to go not only to that next person, but later people down the line. You want an endorsement on the back of that instrument. I don't remember seeing the thing about in a lunge. Usually it's on the back an inch and a half on the back, but you can also have something called a lunge. A lunge is basically a document attached, firmly affixed, and the UCC's made that pretty flexible. Just a staple's enough. Question about tape, I think, would be much more skeptical, but you want it pretty firmly attached. You can do a string of endorsements along a document like that because that 1.5 inches of a check on the back is very limited, and there is some case law that suggests that as long as the signature of an endorser is somewhere on the instrument, preferably on the back and preferably at that 1.5 inches, as long as the no contrary indication is given as to why they sign an instrument, it will be deemed an endorsement. We know the different ways we can discharge the obligations pretty good, or pretty clear, I should say. One is basically cancellation, consists of any act that indicates the intended to destroy the validity of the instrument. That's pretty straightforward. A renunciation is the unilateral act of a holder of instrument, usually without consideration, where the holder gives up the right to instrument. So say somebody owed me some money, they wrote a check to me, $500. Now, what can I do later on? Maybe they're good friends of mine. I worked with them for a long time. I'm doing really well in my business. I could just rip up the check. That's renunciation. Cancellation is usually done by the other party. In some fact, like a stop payment type thing. And then the last one is, of course, a payment. Payment's the best one. Payment discharges the debt, and basically it's canceled. It's over. The book does a nice job talking about lost or accidentally destroyed instruments. And technically, I don't know how you prove the existence of it because it's been destroyed. But if you can prove the existence of it, the fact that it was accidentally destroyed or mutilated or seemingly canceled does not, or accidentally stamped canceled, and it wasn't your intent to do so. It's all about intent, and the validity of the document can still be enforced through the contract, if you will, just on the same contract principles. Just like a contract that gets accidentally destroyed doesn't destroy the intent of the parties to stay bound. I'm sorry if I was a little bit all over the place, but it's a very short chapter. It's very important. We're talking about endorsement of an instrument or lack of endorsement of an instrument. There are warranties that come with it, but there's also a secondary liability that comes after the initial obligor fails to pay. And that's why the endorsement isn't just a fun thing where you're going to get paid. It might put you on the hook for collection if the primary party doesn't make good on the instrument. But I think I have a video up there. If I don't, I certainly will. There's a couple of excellent ones I found on YouTube in the past from lawyers and law schools and other people that educate on commercial paper that do a much better job than I do. But just to make it a little bit more personal, here's your instructor. Here I am. Jim Corman, how you doing? And hopefully you get through the material and it's not too painful. But I think these first 5 chapters on commercial paper are the toughest of business law too.